guy was just supposed to take care of his daughter. That's it. No strings, no attention, no love story. But what started as a job turned into something way deeper, something real. He thought I was just the help. Turns out, I helped him find something money could never buy. Hey, love, if you believe real love has no color, no class, and no limits, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay with me. This is the story of how I went from invisible to unforgettable. I never imagined my life would bring me here, standing at the gates of a mansion that looked like something out of a movie. Me, a regular black girl from the South Side, suitcase in hand, staring up at this cold, silent castle like I had just stepped into someone else's story. My name is Nia, and I've always worked hard for everything I've had. No shortcuts, no silver spoons, just hustle, heart, and faith. When I got the call about a live-in nanny position for a billionaire's daughter, I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. I needed the job, but more than that, I needed a fresh start. The place was quiet, too quiet. It smelled like polished wood and new money. Every surface was spotless, every corner too perfect. But underneath all that shine, it felt empty, like a place people lived in, but didn't actually live. I met the housekeeper first, barely looked me in the eye. The chef didn't speak more than a grunt. No one asked my name. I was just the new nanny. That's it. Then I saw him. Tall, sharp suit, cold eyes. He walked through the grand hallway like he owned the world, and maybe he did. I'd never seen a man carry that kind of presence. But he didn't even glance my way. Not a nod, not a smile, just nothing. And for some reason, that nothing hit harder than words ever could. He was rich, powerful, alone, and so was I. Funny how two people can live under the same roof and feel like they're on different planets. I wasn't there for him, though. I was there for his daughter, and I told myself I was gonna keep it that way. No distractions, no fairy tales, just the job. From the very beginning, I knew my place in that house, and it wasn't next to him. It was behind closed doors, in the shadows, where people like me usually end up in homes like that. The staff barely spoke to me. I'd walk into a room and conversations would stop. They'd lower their voices when I passed. I wasn't part of their world. I was hired help, invisible, disposable, and honestly, I was used to it. I'd worked enough jobs where people looked through me instead of at me. So I kept my head down and did what I came there to do. He, Mr. Stone, as everyone called him, never really acknowledged me. Not even a full sentence, just a sharp morning, as he sipped his espresso and disappeared behind those tall glass doors of his home office. His world moved fast. Business calls, meetings, travel. He barely had time to look at his daughter, let alone the woman caring for her. But I noticed something. For a man who had it all, he looked empty, lonely, worn out. His suits were tailored, but his smile never quite reached his eyes. Still, I didn't let that distract me. My priority was her, Amelia. She was 5, quiet, wide brown eyes, curly hair her father didn't know what to do with, and sadness in her that no child should ever carry. The first time I brushed her hair, she flinched. That's when I realized she didn't just need a nanny. She needed someone real, someone patient, someone who saw her. And maybe, deep down, I needed that too. That house may have been cold, but I was determined to bring at least one room in it back to life, starting with Amelia's. Amelia didn't talk much at first. She'd sit there on the edge of her bed, holding a worn-out stuffed giraffe, staring out the big window like she was waiting for someone to come home. But that someone wasn't coming, and I knew that kind of waiting. It had lived inside me too when I was little. So I didn't push her. I just showed up every day. I made her breakfast, even when she barely ate. I read her bedtime stories, even when she didn't listen. I started leaving little notes in her lunchbox with silly drawings. You got this, superstar. One day, she smiled. Just a little, but I saw it. That was the beginning. We painted together. We danced around the playroom in pajamas. We made pancakes and got flour all over the floor. And slowly, she started opening up. One night, while I was brushing her hair, she whispered, "I miss Mommy." My heart sank. I knelt beside her and said, "It's okay to miss her. It's okay to talk about her too." That was the first time she let me hug her. From then on, we were inseparable. She'd call for me before she called for anyone else, even her father. I became her comfort, her calm, her safe space, and while I was busy trying to heal her, something was shifting in the house, something subtle. I'd catch him, Mr. Stone, watching us, quietly, from the hallway, or leaning against a doorway with that unreadable look on his face. He never said much, but something in his eyes softened every time he saw me with Amelia. Still, I told myself this wasn't anything more than a job. I was here to care for his daughter, not to feel seen by her father. It was a Tuesday night when everything started to shift. Amelia had caught a fever. It hit fast. One minute she was fine, the next she was burning up and crying in her bed. I stayed with her the whole night, cold towels, medicine, soft lullabies. I held her close, rocking her gently like she was my own. Around 2 a.m., I looked up, and there he was, Mr. Stone, standing in the doorway. No suit, no phone in hand, just sweatpants, a worried look, and something else I hadn't seen before: vulnerability. He walked in quietly. "Is she okay?" he asked, voice low. I nodded. "Her fever's coming down." He stepped closer, looking at her sleeping in my arms. Then he looked at me, really looked at me. "Thank you for being here." That moment stayed with me. The next morning, he made coffee for both of us, just 2 cups on the counter like it was normal. He even asked how I slept. I didn't know what surprised me more, the question or the fact that he waited for the answer. From then on, it was little things. He lingered longer at breakfast. He asked me what music I liked. He noticed when I wore my hair differently. Once, I caught him watching me and Amelia dancing in the living room. He didn't say a word, but he smiled. Not the polite kind, a real one. The kind that says, "I see you." And in those quiet moments, I started seeing him too. Not the billionaire, not the cold boss, just a man, a father trying, and maybe failing, but showing up anyway. But I didn't let myself get carried away. I reminded myself this wasn't a fairy tale. I was just the nanny, right? Or was I becoming something more? I don't know exactly when it happened, but somewhere along the line, he stopped looking like just Amelia's father or my boss. He started looking like a man I couldn't ignore. It was in the way he'd wait for me in the kitchen each morning, 2 mugs in hand, how he'd ask about my day before I could even ask about his, or how he'd walk into the playroom after work, loosen his tie, and sit on the floor next to us without saying a word, just being there. One afternoon, I was making lunch when he brushed past me to grab a glass from the cupboard. Our hands touched, just for a second, but my breath caught in my chest. He paused, too, looked down at my hand, then up at me. There was something in his eyes that wasn't there before. And just like that, the air between us changed. After that, I started noticing things I tried not to, like how his voice got softer when he said my name, or how he listened when I spoke, like my words mattered, how he laughed more around me and Amelia, like we were a family. But I couldn't let myself believe in that. I'd grown up around men who took what they wanted and left without warning. And no matter how kind his gestures were, this was still his world. not mine. He was a billionaire, a man with access to women who looked nothing like me. What could he possibly see in a black nanny from the other side of town? So I kept smiling. I kept showing up. I kept pretending like my heart wasn't starting to do things it wasn't supposed to. Because love wasn't part of the job description, was it? One quiet evening, after Amelia had gone to bed, I found him sitting alone in the backyard. No phone, no laptop, just him, staring at the stars like they held answers he couldn't find. I hesitated, then stepped outside. He looked up. You ever wonder if some people are just meant to be alone? That question, it felt heavy, like he'd been carrying it for a long time. I sat down beside him. Sometimes, but I think people carry pain in different ways. Some hide, some pretend, and some just forget how to let anyone in. He looked at me for a long time. Then he spoke. He told me about his wife, how they met in college, how she was the only person who ever really knew him, how she got sick, fast, gone in less than a year, and how he didn't just lose her, he lost himself. He said, I don't know how to be a father. I'm trying, but most days I feel like I'm failing. I wanted to cry because I knew that kind of loss, not just the kind that buries someone, but the kind that buries you along with them. So I opened up too. I told him about my childhood, how my dad left when I was 5, how my mom worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, how I used to cry myself to sleep some nights, wondering why I wasn't enough to make someone stay. And there we were, 2 broken hearts sitting in the dark, trying to find a little light in each other. That night, something between us changed, not because of touch or words, but because of truth. He let me see the real him, and for the first time, I wanted to believe. Maybe he was starting to see the real me too. It was a Saturday night, the kind of night where the air feels heavier, like something's about to happen. He was hosting a charity gala at the mansion. The place was filled with people in designer clothes, champagne flowing like water, laughter echoing down the marble halls. I wasn't supposed to be there, but Amelia had begged me to stay until she fell asleep. So I tucked her in, then stepped out into the hallway to leave. That's when I heard him. Nia, wait. I turned. He was standing at the top of the stairs. No crowd around him, just him, alone. He walked down slowly, still in his suit, bow tie undone, holding 2 glasses of wine. I figured you could use this, he said, handing me one. We didn't go into the party. We ended up in the kitchen, the same kitchen where we'd had 100 quiet mornings. He leaned against the counter, looking at me like he was trying to memorize my face. You're not like anyone I've ever met, he said quietly. I laughed, nervous. I get that a lot. He stepped closer. I mean it. You see people, really see them. You saw Amelia when I couldn't. And somehow, you saw me too. Before I could respond, he brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered. And then he kissed me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't demanding. It was gentle, real, like he'd been holding it in for a long time. My heart didn't know what to do. I pulled away, not because I didn't feel it, but because I did. Too much. I'm sorry, I whispered, turning away. This isn't part of my world. And even though he didn't stop me, I felt his eyes on my back as I walked away, and I felt my heart break a little. After that night, everything changed, and not in the way I wanted. I started pulling away, on purpose. I kept my conversations short, avoided eye contact, focused only on Amelia. I even started eating meals in the nursery again, like I used to when I first arrived. He noticed. Of course he did. He didn't push. He gave me space, but I could feel the tension every time we passed each other in the hallway. Every time our hands almost touched, but didn't. The warmth that had started blooming between us, gone. Just like that. Amelia sensed it too. She asked me one day, "Are you mad at Daddy?" I smiled and shook my head. "No, baby. Grown-ups just get confused sometimes." Truth is, I was confused, scared. What we shared that night felt real, but I couldn't let myself fall for a man like him. A man who could go back to his perfect world with perfect women, while I'd still be the girl who once stood in the kitchen hoping for something that was never meant for her. So I made a choice. I wrote a letter, short, simple, respectful, thanking him for the opportunity, telling him how much I loved being a part of Amelia's life. But I said it was time for me to move on. I folded it neatly and left it on the desk in the study. Then I packed my things. I didn't even say goodbye to him, only to Amelia. She cried when I hugged her, wrapped her little arms around my neck and said, "Don't go." I kissed her forehead and whispered, "You're stronger than you think. Never forget that." Then I walked out of the mansion, trying not to cry, trying not to wonder if he'd even come after me. A week passed. 7 days without Amelia's laugh, without the smell of fresh coffee in that cold kitchen, without his quiet presence lingering in the background of my every thought. I tried to move on, found a small job at a daycare, rented a tiny studio apartment on the edge of the city. It was quiet, simple, safe, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd left something behind, or maybe someone. Then, one rainy evening, I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it slowly and froze. There he was, soaked from the rain, hair a mess, no fancy suit, just jeans, a sweater, and eyes that looked like they hadn't slept since I left. And beside him was Amelia, holding his hand, wearing her little rain boots, clutching that same stuffed giraffe like her life depended on it. He didn't say anything right away, just stood there, breathing hard, like he'd run the whole way. Then he looked at me and said, "Don't go." Not again. My heart stopped. He stepped forward. "You were never just a nanny. You were the one who brought my daughter back to life. You were the one who saw me when I couldn't even see myself. You taught me what love looks like, real love, and I don't want to lose that. Not now, not ever." I looked down at Amelia. She smiled, eyes hopeful. "Can we go home now?" And in that moment, I knew home wasn't the mansion. It wasn't where I lived before. It was them. I let the tears fall, stepped aside, and whispered, "Come in." Sometimes love doesn't knock gently. Sometimes it stands in the rain and begs for one more chance. And sometimes you say yes. Life looks a lot different now. Mornings aren't quiet anymore. They're filled with laughter, cartoons playing too loud, and pancakes shaped like hearts. Amelia wakes me up most days with hugs instead of alarms. She calls me Mama Nia now, though lately she's been dropping the Nia part. And him? He still drinks his fancy coffee, still wears his tailored suits, still takes billion-dollar calls from his home office. But every night he comes home to me, not the nanny, me, the woman who knows how he takes his tea when he's stressed, the woman who taught his daughter how to braid her curls, the woman who helped him believe in second chances. He tells me he loves me every single day, not with flowers or diamonds, but with presence, with effort, with his hands in mine and his eyes only ever on me. We're not perfect. We still argue about silly things like bedtime routines and laundry piles. But every fight ends with forgiveness. Every hard day ends with love. Sometimes I catch myself staring at him when he's dancing with Amelia in the living room. And I smile because I remember the man who once barely said 2 words to me, who thought I was just a nanny. Now he calls me his heart, his home, his everything, and I don't need a fairy tale anymore. I have something better, real love, built on trust, pain, growth, and grace. This isn't the life I planned, but it's the life I never knew I deserved. If you've ever felt unseen, like your love, your heart, your worth didn't fit into someone else's world, just know the right person will never overlook what makes you beautiful. Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe in love that sees you. Thank you for listening, love.